The emergency signal shot through space like a scream in the darkness. Every radio, every communication device in the galaxy picked up the desperate message. Commander Yi Hannah stood on the bridge of her burning command ship, watching through the cracked viewport as her beautiful homeworld died below. The Vorthok ships moved like metal sharks through space. Their dark hulls gleamed with weapon fire as they systematically destroyed everything the Kaleri had built over thousands of years. Cities that had stood for centuries were now smoking ruins. The orbital defense platforms, pride of Kaleri engineering, floated as twisted wreckage. Hannah's hands shook as she gripped the communications console. Her people were peaceful traders and explorers. They built ships for carrying goods and discovering new worlds, not for war. The graceful curves of Kaleri. Vessels were designed for beauty and efficiency, not survival under enemy fire. Commander, the eastern continent is gone, her tactical officer reported, his voice breaking. The Vorthok are moving to the northern cities now. Hannah closed her eyes. 3 billion Kaleri lived on those northern continents. Families, children, elderly, who couldn't evacuate fast enough. The Vorthok didn't take prisoners. They didn't negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path like a plague of metal locusts. The Galactic Council had been useless, as always, for 3 days. While Kaleri children hid in bomb shelters and parents died protecting their homes, the Council had debated. They discussed protocols and procedures. They formed committees to study the situation. They scheduled more meetings to discuss their previous meetings. Meanwhile, an entire civilization burned. Send the distress call to the rim sectors, Hannah whispered to her communications officer, Lieutenant Park Jinsu. Her voice was barely audible over the explosions echoing through the ship's hull. Jinsu looked confused. Commander, the rim sectors are mostly empty space and asteroid fields. There's nothing out there except ... The humans, Hannah finished. Everyone knew about the Deathworlders living on the galaxy's edge. Strange beings from a planet so violent that everything there tried to kill everything else. They lived in constant war, even with their own kind. Most civilized species avoided human space entirely. But right now, as another Vorthok missile tore through her ship's armor, Hannah didn't need civilization. She needed someone crazy enough to actually fight back. The message went out into the void, carrying with it the last hope of a dying world. Somewhere in the darkness of space, on ships built for war rather than peace, humans received a call, and unlike the Galactic Council, humans had a reputation for actually doing something about monsters. The distress signal arrived at Outpost 7 at exactly 0300 hours. Ship time. Admiral Park Min-ho was already awake, reviewing patrol reports in his private quarters aboard the UES Vengeance. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept drinking it anyway. Sleep never came easy when you were responsible for protecting humanity's frontier. The message played twice before Min-ho understood what he was hearing. An entire alien civilization was being wiped out, while their government talked about it in meeting rooms. He read the tactical data again. 3 billion innocent people, cities burning, children dying. His fist hit the command console so hard that the metal dented. The sound echoed through the bridge like a gunshot, and every crew member on duty turned to look at their commander. Captain Kim Dae-ho, get up here now, Min-ho barked into his communicator. Within seconds, his second-in-command was running onto the bridge, still pulling on his uniform jacket. Sir, what's the situation? Min-ho forwarded the Kalari message to Kim's personal display. He watched his captain's face go through the same emotions he had just experienced. Confusion, then understanding, then cold anger. How long to reach their system? Min-ho asked his navigation officer, Lieutenant Colonel Lee Ji-won. She was already running calculations on her computer. Her fingers flew across the holographic display, pulling up star charts and hyperspace routes. Standard approach would take 36 hours, sir, but if we push the fusion drives past their safety limits and take the direct route through the Magellan Nebula, How long, Lieutenant Colonel? 18 hours, sir. Maybe 16, if we're willing to risk burning out the engines. Minho didn't hesitate. While other species would spend weeks debating the risks and forming committees to study the situation, humans had a simpler approach to evil. You found it, and you killed it. Do it. Send the order to all ships in the Third Fleet. We leave in 30 minutes. Any captain who can't get his crew ready in time gets left behind. The bridge exploded into controlled chaos. Officers ran to their stations, fingers dancing over control panels as they prepared the fleet for immediate departure. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All hands, this is Admiral Park. We just received a distress call from an alien world, under attack. 3 billion innocent people are about to die while their politicians argue about what to do. We're going to do what humans have always done when monsters hurt innocent people. We're going to stop them. Throughout the ship, Marines checked their weapons, and engineers pushed the engines to maximum power. In 30 minutes, 18 human warships would jump into hyperspace, racing toward a battle that wasn't their fight, for people they'd never met, because that's what humans did. Space around the dying Kaleri homeworld had been quiet for exactly 17 seconds. The Vorthok fleet was finishing off the last of the orbital defense stations, their sleek black warships moving like sharks through a school of fish. Commander Grake smiled from his flagship's bridge, watching the beautiful alien world burn. Below, another conquest for the Empire. Then reality tore open. 18 holes appeared in space itself, crackling with energy and distorting the stars behind them. What came through those holes wasn't like anything the galaxy had seen before. These weren't the graceful, curved ships that most civilizations built. These were flying fortresses. Angular chunks of metal and weapons that looked like they'd been designed by someone who expected to get shot at. Captain Kim Daeho stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching his tactical display as human ships materialized around the Vorthok fleet. The aliens had been caught completely off guard. In all their conquests, no one had ever been crazy enough to jump directly into an active battle zone. "Sir, we're reading 47 Vorthok vessels," his weapons officer reported. "They're trying to form defensive positions." Kim almost smiled. The Vorthok were used to fighting civilized enemies who followed predictable patterns. Fight at long range, exchange formal challenges, give warnings before attacking. Humans had thrown out that playbook centuries ago. "Target their engine blocks," Kim ordered calmly. "No survivors on military vessels. These things hurt innocent people." The human fleet opened fire without warning or ceremony. Magnetic accelerator cannons, designed to punch through asteroid-sized chunks of ice and rock, turned Vorthok armor plating into vapor. Missile swarms, each one carrying enough explosives to level a city block, swarmed over enemy shields like angry hornets dot down on the planet's surface. Kaleri, refugees hiding in emergency shelters, watched through their damaged view screens, in complete shock. For 3 days, they'd seen their beautiful ships destroyed by Vorthok weapons. The elegant vessels their people built were works of art, designed for exploring the galaxy and carrying trade, goods between friendly worlds. But these human ships were something else entirely. They looked like they'd been built in a factory that only made 2 things: weapons and more weapons. Every surface bristled with gun turrets. Every angle was designed to deflect incoming fire. These weren't exploration vessels or cargo haulers. These were warships, built by people who expected the universe to try to kill them every single day. A Vorthok cruiser, one of the largest ships in their fleet, tried to run from the human onslaught. It didn't make it 3 kilometers before human fighters swarmed over it like metal wasps, their weapons cutting through its hull until the ship broke apart in a shower of debris. The predators had suddenly become prey, and they were learning what it felt like to be hunted by something far more dangerous than themselves. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Guan sat in the Combat Information Center of the UES Vengeance, surrounded by holographic displays showing the battle from every angle. Her fingers danced across the control panels as she coordinated 12 squadrons of human fighters, each pilot pushing their craft to limits that would terrify most alien species. Ghost Squadron, you've got 3 Vorthok interceptors coming in. From your 6 o'clock, she transmitted, her voice calm, despite the chaos erupting around them. Copy that, Control. We see them, came the reply from Squadron Leader Park Jinsu. His fighter had already taken hits from Vorthok plasma cannons. The left wing was barely hanging on, and his shields were down to 30%. Any reasonable pilot would have retreated to the safety of the fleet. Instead, Jinsu dove straight into the debris field from a destroyed Kalari space station. The Vorthok pilots followed, confident in their superior numbers and undamaged ships. They had conquered 17 different worlds using the same tactics. Overwhelming force, advanced technology, and the knowledge that most species would surrender when faced with certain death. But humans weren't most species. Jinsu's fighter disappeared behind a chunk of twisted metal the size of a city bus. The Vorthok pilots slowed down, trying to track him on their sensors. That hesitation cost them everything. Jinsu came out from behind the debris at an angle that should have been impossible. His remaining weapons blazing, 2 Vorthok fighters exploded before their pilots even realized they were under attack. Nice work, Ghost Leader, G1 transmitted. Reaper Squadron, you're cleared for attack pattern Delta 7. Across the battlefield, human pilots were performing maneuvers that violated basic physics and common sense. They used destroyed ships as shields flew through clouds of superheated plasma, and treated combat damage as a minor inconvenience rather than a reason to retreat. Flight Officer Cho Minja's fighter had lost its entire right engine assembly after taking a direct hit from a Vorthok destroyer. Warning lights flashed across his cockpit, and his computer was screaming at him to eject. Instead, he adjusted his flight pattern to compensate for the damaged engine and kept fighting. Control, this is Reaper 7. I'm down 1 engine, but still combat effective. Negative, Reaper 7. Return to base for repairs. With respect, Control, these aliens hurt innocent people. I'm staying in the fight. Ji-won shook her head, but she understood. Every human pilot out there had seen the footage from the Kalari surface. Burning cities, dead children, families torn apart by monsters who killed for sport. The Vorthok Empire had built their reputation on fear. They expected their enemies to break when faced with superior firepower. They had never fought an enemy that came from a world where surviving to adulthood was an achievement, where every day was a battle against a planet that actively tried to kill its inhabitants. They were learning the hard way that Deathworlders didn't break. They got angry. Fleet Commander Greigth watched his tactical display with growing horror. In 30 minutes of combat, the human fleet had destroyed half of his ships. His beautiful, sleek vessels were being torn apart by these ugly, angular monsters that fought like rabid animals. The Vorthok Empire had conquered 17 worlds using fear and overwhelming technology. Their black ships were the terror of the galaxy, appearing suddenly to crush any resistance before it could form. But these humans fought differently. They didn't retreat when damaged. They didn't surrender when outnumbered. They just kept coming. Commander, we've lost the destroyer Squadron 7, his tactical officer reported. The humans are using some kind of coordinated attack pattern we've never seen before. Greith's claws scraped against his command chair's armrests. His species had evolved from apex predators, but these Deathworlders made him feel like prey. He needed to change the battle's momentum, to make the humans hesitate, to show them they could be hurt. His scanners identified several human ships hanging back from the main battle. They were smaller than the warships, painted white instead of military gray, and covered with strange red symbols. Medical vessels, his computer translated. Non-combatant support ships. A cruel smile spread across Greigth's reptilian features. Every species had rules about medical ships. Even the most violent civilizations respected the sanctity of those who healed rather than harmed. If he destroyed these vessels, surely the humans would realize they were outmatched and retreat. All remaining ships, target those medical vessels, he ordered. Show these primitives what happens when they interfere with the Vorthok Empire. The attack was devastating. Plasma cannons designed to crack planetary fortresses focused their fire on ships built for healing, not warfare. The UEN's Mercy, carrying wounded Colliery civilians, exploded in a ball of white-hot gas. The UEN's Hope, its medical bays full of injured human pilots, broke apart under concentrated fire. For exactly 3 seconds, the human fleet went silent. Then Admiral Park Min-ho's voice cut through every communication channel in the system. His words were calm, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in their quiet fury. They fired on hospital ships, all vessels, weapons free, no quarter. The change was immediate and horrifying. The human ships had been fighting like professional soldiers up until that moment. Disciplined, controlled, following rules of engagement that limited unnecessary destruction. Now they fought like something else entirely. Human fighters stopped taking prisoners when enemy pilots ejected. Damaged Vorthok ships trying to surrender found their communications ignored as human weapons tore them apart. The methodical professional military engagement became something primal and savage. Captain Kim Dae-ho watched from his bridge as human Marines prepared boarding pods. "Sir, should we accept surrender from the remaining enemy vessels?" "No," Kim replied, his voice cold as space itself. They crossed the line. Now they learn what happens when you hurt healers in front of humans. The Vorthok had made their final mistake. The hyperspace rifts opened like wounds in reality, and through them came the kind of ships that gave Galactic Council members nightmares. These weren't the sleek warships of the Third Fleet that had started the battle. These were the monsters that humanity kept hidden in the Outer Rim. The vessels they only brought out when someone crossed lines that should never be crossed. Major Song Kung-soo pressed his face against the viewport of his marine dropship, watching as the reinforcements took their positions around the dying Colliery system. The UES Devastator was so large it had its own gravity field. Its hull bristled with weapons that could turn moons into asteroid fields. Behind it came the orbital bombardment platforms, floating cities of destruction that carried enough firepower to sterilize entire continents. "Holy hell," whispered Sergeant Im Soo-yang from the seat next to him. Command really called in the big guns. Through the dropship's speakers, they could hear the radio chatter from the fleet. Admiral Park's voice was coordinating the new arrivals, with the cold efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Devastator, you're cleared for maximum firepower on all remaining Vorthok capital ships. Orbital platforms, begin targeting enemy ground installations. I want those prison camps marked for precision strikes only." Kung-soo watched as the massive human dreadnought began its work. Weapons that violated 3 different galactic warfare conventions lit up space with beams of coherent energy. A Vorthok battleship, one of their largest vessels, simply ceased to exist as human firepower washed over it. The Vorthok had built their empire on fear, using overwhelming force to crush anyone who opposed them. They had never faced an enemy that treated overwhelming force as a starting point rather than an end goal. "Looks like the Navy's having fun," Soo-yang commented, watching another Vorthok dreadnought break apart under sustained fire from human railguns. Each projectile hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon, turning enemy armor into clouds of superheated metal. Kung-soo checked his rifle for the 3rd time, making sure every system was green. His Marines were loaded into assault dropships, waiting for their turn to join the fight. The Navy could destroy enemy fleets, but someone had to go down to the planet's surface and deal with the Vorthok forces that were still holding Colliery. "Civilians prisoner. Our turn next," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline pumping through his system. "Lock and load, Marines." Around him, 200 of humanity's finest warriors began their final equipment checks. They had trained for urban combat, prisoner rescue, and fighting in hostile environments. The Vorthok ground forces were about to learn why human Marines had a reputation that made entire star systems surrender rather than face them in battle. The dropship's engines roared to life, and Major Song Kun-soo led his Marines toward the surface of an alien world, ready to show the galaxy what happened when someone hurt innocents in front of humans. The dropships hit the surface of Kalari's second moon like falling meteors, their armored hulls screaming through the thin atmosphere. Staff Sergeant Cho Min-jae was the first Marine out of his transport, his boots hitting the rocky ground as enemy plasma fire lit up the darkness around him. The prison camps stretched across the moon's surface, like a metal scar. Thousands of civilians were trapped behind energy barriers, guarded by Vorthok soldiers who treated their prisoners like cattle. The alien guards had grown lazy over the months of occupation, confident that no rescue would ever come. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "Alpha Squad, move left. Bravo Squad, take the right flank. Charlie Squad, you're with me through the center," Min-jae whispered into his helmet communicator. His night vision goggles turned the moon's perpetual darkness into a green-tinted landscape, where every enemy position glowed like a beacon. The Vorthok guards were impressive specimens. On their homeworld, they were apex predators. 7-foot tall, reptilian nightmares, with claws that could rip through steel plating. They had conquered dozens of worlds by being faster, stronger, and more vicious than anything they encountered. But they had never fought humans. Private Li Juan moved through the camp's outer perimeter like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the rocky ground. The Vorthok sentry never saw her coming. One moment he was scanning the horizon for threats, the next moment he was unconscious on the ground, taken down by a human who weighed half what he did but knew exactly where to strike. Urban combat was something humans had been perfecting for thousands of years. Every Earth city was a training ground, every street corner a potential battlefield, while other species built their military tactics around open field engagements and formal warfare. Humans had learned to fight in the shadows. "Perimeter guards are down," Ji-won reported, moving to secondary positions. Corporal Park Jin-soo and his fire team hit the main guard post from 3 different angles simultaneously. The Vorthok defenders found themselves surrounded by enemies they couldn't see, taking fire from directions that should have been impossible. Their thermal sensors, designed to track warm-blooded prey, couldn't lock onto humans who knew how to mask their heat signatures. The alien guards tried to fall back to their prepared positions, but humans had been studying the camp layout from orbital surveillance for hours. Every escape route was blocked. Every defensive position was compromised before the battle even started. "Guard towers are secured," Park reported, beginning prisoner extraction. The energy barriers holding the Kalari civilians flickered and died as human combat engineers disabled the power systems. Families that had been separated for months ran toward each other across the camp's central courtyard. "Camps are secured," Min-jae reported to command. "Civilians are safe," requesting medical teams for prisoner evacuation. The rescue had taken exactly 18 minutes. The Vorthok occupation force was either dead or unconscious, and not a single human Marine had been seriously wounded. The surrender transmission arrived 18 hours after the last Vorthok ground position fell. Fleet Commander Grake's image appeared on Admiral Park Min-ho's main screen. The once proud alien leader, now looking desperate and defeated. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed signs of battle damage, sparking consoles and flickering lights. "Human Admiral," Greg began, his voice carefully controlled. "The Vorthok Empire recognizes your superior tactics. We offer terms of surrender, full withdrawal from Kalari's space, compensation for damages, a formal treaty recognizing human territorial claims? Admiral Park studied the alien commander's face for a long moment. Around him, the bridge crew of the UES Vengeance waited in silence. They had seen the footage from the liberated prison camps. Kalari children who had been separated from their parents for months. Civilians who had been worked to death in alien labor facilities. Entire families wiped out for the crime of existing on a world the Vorthok wanted. "You hurt innocents," Park said simply, his voice carrying across the communication channel with quiet finality. "We don't negotiate with monsters." The transmission cut off with the press of a button. Captain Kim Daeho stepped forward. "Sir, should we pursue the retreating enemy vessels?" "All of them," Park replied. "Send word to Fleet Command. We're going to need more ships." The chase began immediately. Vorthok vessels, damaged and demoralized, tried to escape toward their home territory. But human ships were faster, and human crews didn't need rest the way other species did. The pursuit lasted 4 weeks, a running battle across 3 star systems, as the remnants of the Vorthok fleet were hunted down one by one. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Guan coordinated the fighter squadrons as they harassed the fleeing enemy. "Ghost Squadron, you've got 2 Vorthok cruisers trying to break away toward the Proxima system. Don't let them escape." "Copy that. Control. No one gets away from this fight." The message spread throughout the galaxy faster than the human fleet could travel. The Vorthok Empire, terror of 17 worlds, was being systematically destroyed by a species that most civilized governments had dismissed as primitive Deathworlders. Trade routes buzzed with reports of human ships appearing wherever Vorthok forces tried to regroup. When the human fleet finally reached the Vorthok homeworld, they found a planet in chaos. The government that had ruled through fear and intimidation for centuries suddenly faced enemies who were more frightening than they were. Cities that had celebrated the conquest of peaceful worlds now trembled as human warships took orbit overhead. Admiral Park opened a communication channel to the entire planet. "This is Admiral Park Minho of the Human Defense Fleet. Your empire hurt innocent people. Your military attacked medical ships. Your soldiers tortured children. You will surrender unconditionally, or we will consider you an active threat to galactic peace." The response came within minutes. Tuttle. Unconditional surrender. Evil had found no sanctuary while humans drew breath. 3 months after the fall of the Vorthok Empire, Captain Im Suyang walked onto the bridge of the UES Guardian for her morning shift. The newly commissioned ship was humanity's latest design, incorporating lessons learned from the Kalari campaign. Sleeker than the old warships, but still unmistakably built for battle. Through the main view screen, she could see the Kalari homeworld spinning peacefully in space. The cities were rebuilding, their elegant spires rising from the ashes of war. Children played in parks that had been battlefields just months ago. It was exactly the kind of sight that made the long patrols worthwhile. "Status report," she requested, from her executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Park Jinsu. "All quiet, Captain. The former Vorthok worlds are adjusting well to their new freedom. Trade routes are reopening, and we haven't detected any hostile activity in the sector for 2 weeks." Suyang nodded, settling into her command chair. The Guardian was part of the new human patrol fleet, ships assigned to keep the peace in regions that had been liberated from Vorthok control. 17 worlds that had lived in terror for decades were now free to govern themselves, protected by human vessels that made sure no one would ever enslave them again. Her communications officer looked up from his console. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth's Fleet Command. Put it through to my ready room," she said, standing up. Important messages from home usually meant new orders, and she preferred to review them in private before sharing them with the crew. The message was from Admiral Park Minho himself, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Forces after his victory at Kalari. His image appeared on her personal screen, looking tired but satisfied. "Captain Suyang, I wanted to personally inform you that the Galactic Council has officially extended an invitation to humanity, not for membership, but for something more significant. They want us to serve as the galaxy's peacekeeping force. She leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. For centuries, the Council had been a talking shop, debating endlessly while innocent people suffered. Now they were essentially admitting that sometimes the only solution to evil was someone willing to fight it. The Council has recognized something that we've always known, the Admiral continued. Civilized societies need protectors. People who are willing to do violence on behalf of those who cannot protect themselves. They've seen what humans can accomplish when we put our minds to ending suffering. Through her ready room's small viewport, Suyan could see a Kalari transport ship passing by, its hull gleaming in the system's sunlight. Inside that ship were families reunited, children who would grow up free, people who could dream of a future without fear. The galaxy had learned a simple truth. Sometimes the only response to monsters was to send something more monstrous to stop them, and humanity was very, very good at being the monsters that monsters feared.